Hi, my name's Jeff Klein, and I'm the Director of High School Ministry here at Peachtree Church.
And I'm Connor Smith, the Director of Elementary Ministry here at Peachtree. Jeff and I are super excited to get to share this video with you today, focusing on what we believe is one of the most beautiful spiritual practices in the Christian faith.
The practice of Sabbath is something that Scripture says is a gift that's given to us by God for our benefit. And yet, in today's fast-paced world that we all live in, it's usually one of the first rhythms of our spiritual life to fall through the cracks. Whether it's our ever-growing to-do list, nonstop busy schedules, or maybe even your children's seemingly endless sports seasons that follow each other one after another, we can often find ourselves feeling exhausted and wishing that there were more hours in the day.
Our hope with this video is to explain not only what it means to practice Sabbath, but why it may be more important to us in today's world to incorporate a regular rhythm of rest into our lives. We also want to use this time to provide some practical ways in which you and your family can start to introduce the idea of Sabbath. Our goal is to equip you as parents to intentionally lead your family in the spiritual practice of Sabbath.
So, the best place to start is probably with what is Sabbath and why is it important? Well, the term Sabbath originates from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means rest or cessation. It was first established by God at the beginning of Genesis chapter 2 as the day of rest and reflection, commemorating the completion of God's creation. Later, in Exodus chapter 20, when God gives Moses the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, we see the fourth commandment is to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. For us as Christians, the Sabbath traditionally involves refraining from regular work and dedicating a specific amount of time to worship, rest, and contemplation of God's goodness. In our lives today, this can express itself in many ways, including fellowship with family and friends, shared meals, or the enjoyment of your favorite hobby that you never seem to have enough time for. In the Gospels, Jesus emphasized that the Sabbath was intended for the benefit of humanity and should not be turned into a burden or a legalistic observance. He highlighted the importance of mercy and compassion and doing good on the Sabbath rather than rigid adherence to rules. In light of that, the way Sabbath looks in your household will most likely be different than the way it looks in someone else's, and that's totally okay. For example, the traditional Christian time for Sabbath on Sundays might not be the best time of the week for your family's schedule, whereas Sunday might be the perfect time for your neighbor's family. My advice for those looking to start incorporating the practice of Sabbath into the life of their family is to first focus on creating time and space for it. Rather than becoming so focused on adhering to a traditional day of the week, allow yourself some space to begin finding a time, even if it's just a few hours, that seems to be easiest for you and your family to develop a weekly rhythm of rest. The important thing to understand is that Sabbath is a time that God designed to be set apart from the rest of our week as a built-in period of restoration and relaxation that is for our benefit.
When we look at the creation story, it's interesting to note that God himself set aside a day for rest on the seventh day. But we know that God wasn't burnt out, and he took a break. So why did he? I think the answer to that question gives us an extremely practical example of the first ever Sabbath and a guideline that we can continue to use in our world today. God rested on the seventh day to set an example for us. The fact that the God of the universe took some time to rest, I think is probably a good indicator that we need to take some time to rest in our lives today. Often, we see that the best leaders are those who lead by example. The same goes when it comes to implementing spiritual habits into the household. A phrase that we use a lot around Peachtree is, you can't pass on what you don't have. It's a tough ask to expect kids to take the Sabbath serious when the example is not set from the beginning. As you continue to set aside a day or a few hours intentionally every week, your children will start to pick up on this and eventually make it a part of their routine as well. Starting small is usually the easiest way to implement new practices without getting the feeling of being overwhelmed. The important part is to be extremely intentional with the time that you do set aside for your Sabbath. During these hours, one of the major things we want to encourage and will continue to encourage is to stay off of your phone and, of course, stay off social media. Unplug and encourage your kids to do the same. Creating this intentional time and space can lead to reconnecting and enjoying each other's company, free from the endless distractions that the world is always throwing at us. Growing up, there were 5 kids in my family. We were all homeschooled, and that's a lot of time to be spending around family members as it is. But every Friday, we would go to Wendy's and we would get Frosties. It was a huge deal for us. Not only was this to celebrate, another week of surviving being around each other at all times, but it was a way that we could signify the start of the weekend and we could kind of celebrate as a family with no distractions. 20 years later, it still sticks out in my mind as some of the best times we had. I can speak from experience, having parents who led my brothers and my sister and myself. They made time to have a rest day, and it was a priority that still sticks with me to this day.
A crucial part of beginning any new practice with the goal of making it stick is consistency. Something that has been helpful for me in developing a level of consistency with my Sabbath has been to look at this practice as a rhythm. For me, my Sabbath is every Friday since I work on Sundays. Because of this, Fridays have become the day I look forward to most out of every week. It's a time where I recharge from the work week and relax. Whether I find myself outside working in my garden, taking that afternoon nap that I've been looking forward to all week, or enjoying my weekly date night with my wife, my Friday Sabbath has become a regular rhythm of my week that is sorely missed if it's neglected. Marking the beginning and the end of a Sabbath with a family meal or the lighting of a candle is a practice that many Christians all over the world have used to signify that this particular period of time is set apart from the rest of their week. When practiced with intentionality, Sabbath becomes a life-giving tool that not only refreshes our body and soul, but also makes space for us to slow down and reflect on our relationship with God. If you're finding yourself in a season of life where you're so busy that you barely have any time to focus on your relationship with God, beginning a weekly rhythm of Sabbath could be the very thing you find yourself needing.
Over the next month, as we explore this spiritual practice as a church family, we want to equip you with a few practical steps that will hopefully make the introduction of Sabbath a fun and enjoyable addition to your family's weekly rhythm.
First, pick a time of the week that seems to be the easiest for you and your family, and start small. Maybe only a couple of hours at first. The hope is that once you experience the restorative benefits of Sabbath in small doses, you may decide that your family wants to set aside more time for it.
Another helpful tip as you're introducing this to your family is to think subtraction rather than addition. As most people know, our weeks are full of tasks and activities that pile up and create stressful schedules. Sabbath is designed to do the exact opposite of that. Use this time to remove stress and anxiety-inducing activities like chores or to-do lists, and then replace them with things and people that nourish your soul.
Something that's often the biggest barrier to rest in today's world is our addiction to our phones. Now, this might be the most challenging tip, but it could lead to a completely different atmosphere in the life of your home. Challenge yourself and your children to use this Sabbath time to unplug and enjoy the present moment. A family activity or a collective preparation of a shared family meal are a couple ideas to replace screen time with family fellowship. Meals are deeply connected to the practice of Sabbath and are a fantastic way to mark the beginning and end of this time with your family.
Lastly, remember that all new practices are difficult to start, but over time become second nature. Keep practicing and notice how God uses your intentionality to draw you and your family closer into a life of worship.
We hope this helps you and your family as you begin your journey of investigating Sabbath. And for those of you who have already created a space and rhythm for this practice, we encourage you to keep doing it. We are looking forward to being a part of this journey with you and seeing how God uses this month in the life of our church to bring our families, students, and children closer into the restful and spirit-filled life He has intended for us.